Imagine, you came to power after a change of dynasty. One decree, and you rewrite the truth in textbooks. But there is a problem. Traces of the old system. Roads, nodes, standards, cities. As if there used to be a single network, independent of the court. If this becomes obvious, you will lose the main thing: legitimacy. The elites will start to doubt. The people will start to compare. And you will be asked only one question. Who gave the order to break the framework? One decree from you, and everything becomes the natural course of history. Wars are declared inevitable. Disappearances are coincidences. And traces of the past are myths. What will you choose? To acknowledge that you rule over the ruins of someone else's system, or to make it so that the ruins seem like the only possible norm? Now let's understand why the mid-19th century looks like an operation, not chaos. Open any school history textbook to the page about the 19th century. You will be shown a beautiful picture of an era of progress, the greatness of empires, and romanticism. They will talk about separate conflicts. Here the Crimean War, there the Indian Rebellion, in another place the American Civil War. Disparate events, each with its own cause, its own consequence, its own logic. But it is enough to simply take a calendar and look closely at the dates for the convenient version to begin to crack at the seams from the very first minutes of scrutiny. 1848. Revolutions erupt throughout Europe simultaneously, as if by the command of an invisible conductor. Paris burns with barricade battles. Berlin rises against the monarchy. Vienna is drowning in blood. Rome rebels against papal authority. As if someone pulled an invisible string, Europe ignited. 1850. On the other side of the planet, the Taiping Rebellion begins. The scale of the slaughter will surpass all wars of the century combined. 1853. The coalition of European powers suddenly unites and besieges Sevastopol. 1857. India explodes in the Sepoy Rebellion. The British will suppress it with a brutality beyond all limits. 1861. America splits in two. A bloody slaughter begins between the North and the South. 1864. Three Latin American giants pounce on tiny Paraguay as if they had prearranged it. The entire planet is ablaze. Moreover, it is synchronized with an accuracy of several years, with coordination impossible for the age of sailing ships and horse messengers. When a fire starts simultaneously in the living room, in the attic, in the basement, and on the roof, you understand. The house is being set on fire. According to a precise schedule with pre-calculated intervals between the bursts. But the most interesting things are not hidden in dates, but in details that historians do not notice. Open the military chronicles of that time. Look at the descriptions of weapons. Pay attention to the technical specifications, samples, serial numbers. Paraguayan soldiers in the jungles of South America, thousands of kilometers away from industrial centers, are shooting from Enfield rifles. The very same ones used by the British during the assault on Sevastopol. Chinese rebels, allegedly peasants with hoes, receive European cannons of the same model that the French use in Crimea. The Northern Army in America is armed with rifles identical to the French models from European campaigns. Where does such unification of weapons come from? In an era when the main transport is sailing ships reliant on the wind, when cargo is transported by horse-drawn carts, when each country stamps its armament according to its own blueprints. Suddenly, the whole world synchronously arms itself with the same samples. This is a centralized distribution of tools for clearing. Someone from a single center provided all sides of conflicts with identical means of destruction on all continents at the same time. You will be told about arms dealers, about international commerce, about the free market. But a superficial analysis of logistics shows the inadequacy of this version. To deliver thousands of tons of iron simultaneously to China, Crimea, America, and Paraguay, infrastructure of colossal scale is required, which officially did not exist. A global network of warehouses, a system of ports, unloading capacities, transport routes are needed. And most importantly, a unified goal is needed. Who is this synchronized military machine aimed against? The answer lies in what is no longer on the maps. Compare the maps of the beginning and the end of the 19th century. Hundreds of cities have disappeared, not renamed, not moved, physically erased. In the British Encyclopedia of 1850, the city of Asgard on the Volga is mentioned with a population of 120,000. In the edition of 1880, this city is not mentioned at all, neither in reference nor in footnote, as if it had never existed. In American documents from 1840, the city of New Palmyra in Texas is listed. 28,000 residents, a port on the river. By 1870, it disappeared without a trace. No ruins, no burial mounds, no traces of foundations. On French maps of the Napoleonic Wars, Châtillon is marked in the south, a fortress, a garrison, an arsenal. Modern researchers cannot even find an approximate location. Entire regions have become desolate. Historians mumble about epidemics, but demographic calculations show something entirely different. On the planet, there existed a unified system of spatial organization. Not an empire in the conventional sense of the word, not a union of separate states united by political treaties, but something much more fundamental and large-scale. Look at the architecture of ancient buildings around the world. From Buenos Aires in South America to Vladivostok on the Pacific coast of Asia, there are buildings constructed according to absolutely identical principles. Identical proportions of rooms, identical structural solutions of supporting elements and ornaments and decorative elements that repeat down to the smallest details. This cannot be a simple borrowing of styles through cultural exchange. It is the product of a single building school that operated across the world simultaneously, applying uniform standards and technologies. The transportation network that is hardly talked about. Old chronicles mention roads that are not on modern maps. Excavations reveal remains of paved tracks at a depth of 3 to 4 meters. They were deliberately covered up. In Siberia, a section of a stone road 20 meters wide has been discovered, leading into the taiga. Modern surveyors checked it. It runs in a straight line for 300 kilometers, ignoring the terrain. Who built such roads in supposedly uninhabited areas? These routes connected continents, and then they were destroyed. The roadway was dismantled, bridges were blown up, fords were flooded. The energy infrastructure represents an even greater mystery. The domes and spires on ancient buildings served quite specific technical functions and were not merely decorative. Note, their heights are multiples of certain numbers, and the distances between objects follow a mathematical pattern. In St. Petersburg, the distance from St. Isaac's Cathedral to the Peter and Paul Fortress is exactly 3,600 meters. From the Admiralty to Smolny is 7,200. These numbers are not accidental. They are calculated based on the wavelength of a particular frequency. Throughout the 19th century, these objects were systematically disabled. Their toppings were removed, metal elements were melted down, and internal mechanisms were destroyed. The Indian Rebellion of 1857 was not a struggle against colonizers. The sepoys defended an ancient system of knowledge that had been preserved on the subcontinent. The British did not destroy armies, but bearers of information. In Delhi, the Red Fort was burned down along with the Imperial Library, 40,000 manuscripts in Sanskrit. In Lucknow, the observatory, which held astronomical tables that were more accurate than the European ones, was blown up. Brahmins, the custodians of an oral tradition passed down for 3,000 years, were shot. By the end of the rebellion, 90% of ancient texts had been destroyed. What remained was taken to London and locked in closed storage. They actually fought against this global system. The Taiping Rebellion in China officially claimed between 20 to 100 million lives, a number so monstrous that the mind refuses to comprehend it. Try to think about it. 100 million people. That is more than the current population of Germany, France, and Spain combined. To kill 100 million in 14 years of warfare, it is necessary to destroy 19,000 people every single day. Without weekends, without breaks for holidays, without stops for winter or bad weather. For 14 consecutive years, day after day, a conveyor of destruction. Peasants with pitchforks are not capable of such scales. An industrial machine is needed for destruction on such a volume. Heavy artillery, developed logistics, iron coordination. The remaining photographs show a strange picture. The walls of some buildings are melted from the inside, while the outside remains intact. Metal structures are bent at angles impossible with ordinary heating, as if twisted by a directed magnetic field. In the vicinity of the destroyed cities, instruments still record an anomalous radiation background. Geologists find glass inclusions in the soil, sand fused at temperatures above 2,000 degrees. Such a temperature is only produced by a thermonuclear reaction, or a weapon unknown to us. Historical sources directly state that alongside the Manchu dynasty, which supposedly suppressed the peasant uprising independently, there were constantly Western military advisors. Britain, France, and other European powers actively supplied weapons, military specialists, and artillery. All at the same time, all coordinated. Synchronously with other military conflicts that were raging at the same time across the globe. The eastern provinces of China were the center of production. They made porcelain with characteristics that modern technologies cannot achieve. Translucent at 2 centimeters, with a wall thickness of 1 millimeter. Silk of a special weave that does not let water through. Gunpowder from which projectiles flew 30% further. After the war, production stopped. Workshops were leveled to the ground, and the masters were left without life. Modern chemists analyzed the remnants of that gunpowder. The composition contains components that cannot be obtained with 19th century technologies. Where did they come from for Chinese peasants? While in China a cleanup was underway, an operation unfolded in Crimea that puzzled historians. Why would Britain and France, who owned half of the world's oceans, send huge fleets into the closed Black Sea for the sake of one city? Sevastopol did not control the straits. Those were further south. It was not the key to the Bosporus. Military analysts still find no strategic sense in this siege. But look at the layout of the Sevastopol bastions from a bird's eye view. Find old drawings and diagrams of the fortifications. The complex geometric shape has absolutely no military meaning for defense against artillery fire. Such a configuration provides no tactical advantages. On the contrary, it creates many dead zones where the defender's fire does not reach, significantly complicating coordination and command of the troops during the defense. However, from the perspective of wave physics, from the perspective of resonant systems and directed energy transfer, this configuration is simply perfect. The United Coalition besieged Sevastopol for 349 days. With absolute superiority in forces, the Allies conducted the siege with mysterious slowness. They did not storm all the bastions at once, but chose specific points. The third bastion fell first, followed by Malakhov Kurgan, and then the ship side. It was in this sequence, as if they were shutting down elements of a single system according to a prearranged scheme. Read the reports of the commanders. They describe chambers beneath the bastions the size of cathedrals, with dome vaults 20 meters high. Powder depots do not need such volumes. However, resonators or energy accumulators do. After the city was captured, it was not used. According to the terms of the Paris Peace Treaty of 1856, Sevastopol was subject to the complete dismantling of its fortifications. But they destroyed much more than the treaty required. They blew up underground structures to a depth of up to 50 meters. They filled in the shafts where entire convoys of building materials went, and still did not fill everything. Modern speleologists find kilometers of sealed tunnels under the city, where no known entrance leads. On the ruins, a new city was built, the layout of which does not repeat any old street, as if they deliberately concealed what was located in those places before. Pay special attention to the uniforms of the opposing armies. French, British, Russian, and Turkish soldiers look practically the same. The same colors, the same cuts, the same insignia. This cannot be fashion or cultural influence. In the midst of a bloody war for total destruction, deadly opponents do not copy each other's uniforms. Identical uniforms are a characteristic feature of a unified intervention corps, formed from different national contingents but operating under a single plan, under a single command, from one control center. The events in Crimea were a rehearsal of technologies. The real slaughter unfolded in America. The beautiful tale of freeing slaves can be discarded. Look at the true nature of the destruction. Richmond, Atlanta, Charleston, Savannah. These cities did not simply fall under the onslaught of troops. The nature of the damages indicates the use of unknown weapons. A standard cannonball from the year 1860, when hitting a brick wall, penetrates it, leaving a hole with a diameter of about 30 centimeters. Yet in the photographs, we see entire neighborhoods literally turned into fine dust. Massive buildings have evaporated without a trace, leaving even no large debris. The streets are littered with small fragments and ash up to the second floor. Compare the preserved photographs of American southern cities after the end of the war with aerial photographs of Dresden after the infamous carpet bombings of World War II. The nature of the destruction is remarkably, terrifyingly similar. The Army of the North chose its targets selectively. The small town of Columbia in South Carolina was burned to the ground. There was a library with an 18,000 collection of technical literature. The nearby Charleston was left almost untouched. The archives had been evacuated in time. In Atlanta, they destroyed the railway workshops where locomotives were repaired, according to blueprints that were not similar to northern models. In Richmond, they blew up an arsenal that produced a special type of gunpowder. Southern shells flew 30% further with the same caliber of artillery. Modern pyrotechnicians cannot reproduce that recipe. It has disappeared without a trace. Official statistics on losses raise even more questions. According to history textbooks, approximately 600,000 people died in the American Civil War. But take a close look at the conscription lists of the Northern Army, at the mobilization documents. There, in black and white, are the drafted soldiers from towns and settlements that simply do not exist on any maps. People were mobilized from localities that disappeared even before the official start of hostilities. Where did the military commissioners get these mysterious draftees? From what mysterious, erased from the face of the earth places did they come? At the opposite end of the planet, in the impenetrable jungles of South America, a genocide of absolute scale was unfolding. Paraguay in 1860 was a prosperous, economically developed country. Its own extensive network of railroads without attracting foreign investments, telegraph communication covering the entire territory, a developed industry operating entirely without British loans and credits, a rare case of complete financial independence for that era. The country exported steam engines of its own production. It produced paper, fabrics, and gunpowder. The literacy rate reached 80%, higher than in England at that time. Newspapers were published in 4 languages. Printing houses, an iron foundry, and an arsenal were operational. The British ambassador wrote to London, "Paraguay shows the world a dangerous example of prosperity without loans from the city." Paraguay in 1870 was literally a scorched, desolate wasteland, drenched in blood. 90% of the entire male population of the country was physically exterminated. Think about the number, 90%. This is not a war. This is selection by sex. The coalition of 3 giants destroyed all men aged 25 to 50 years. Women and children were left. Why? To mix with the soldiers of the interventionists, to create a new population without memories of the past. Local Guarani Indians had been telling Spanish conquistadors and missionaries for centuries about mysterious stone structures overgrown with impenetrable vines in the depths of the jungle, about the enigmatic white-bearded gods who supposedly built these monumental cities in ancient times, long before the Great Flood that wiped out the previous civilization. The Spaniards diligently recorded these legends in their chronicles and reports, but completely failed to understand their true significance and meaning. In the 19th century, a military coalition arrived and literally, physically, wiped everything clean. They killed the last bearers of ancient memory. They methodically destroyed the surviving buildings down to the last stone. They carefully buried all traces. All these externally disparate wars are not connected by the geography of conflicts or political reasons. They are firmly linked by a single technology of destruction, a single handwriting of ruin. Pay close attention to the melted walls of forts in America, to the fused, transformed into a glassy mass bricks of destroyed European fortresses, to the window panes firmly fused into the stone masonry of the walls. The melting temperature of regular construction bricks is about 1,500 degrees Celsius. An ordinary fire, even a very strong one, gives a maximum temperature of 800 degrees. The explosion of black powder creates a brief flash of high temperature, but it lasts for fractions of a second and physically cannot create a sustained, prolonged heating of such monstrous force. And the characteristic craters from powerful explosions? Perfectly round, with a neat rim of ejected soil around the edges, surprisingly resembling craters from the fall of small meteoroids. An ordinary cast iron cannonball leaves a shallow dent in the ground upon impact. The explosion of a shell creates a ragged pit of irregular, chaotic shape with numerous shrapnel damages. But in old photographs, we see absolutely perfect geometric circles with a diameter of tens of meters, as if someone had burned the ground with a giant laser or plasma torch. Witnesses of military actions from completely different remote points on the globe describe the same strange phenomena. Sevastopol. The sky over the city was painted in a deep, bloody color and did not change its hue for a full 3 days. Atlanta. Bright lightning struck vertically into the ground without the usual thunder, leaving deep, melted holes. China. The air remained heavy for weeks, saturated with a suffocating smell of sulfur, burnt metal, and some incomprehensible chemical smoke. This is categorically unlike standard descriptions of ordinary gunpowder battles of that time. These are detailed, precise testimonies of the use of certain destruction technologies that work with atmospheric electricity or other physical principles unknown to us. It is possible that the military actions were directed against the very system of free energy generation. Domes, spires, and the tops of buildings. After their destruction, the energy network ceased to function. The world lost free energy. The era of hydrocarbons began. Oil, coal, gas. Resources that are controlled, sold, granting power to those who control extraction. Destroying cities is not enough. It is necessary to erase memory. Libraries are burning synchronously around the world. 1851. The Library of Congress loses 2/3 of its books. 1862. The archives of Richmond burn in the midst of war. 1860s. A wave of fires in Chinese storages. 1871. The Great Chicago Fire destroys all municipal archives. The pattern is evident. After each war, document storage facilities burn down. A convenient coincidence. What exactly burns? Religious texts and literature survive. Technical documents, engineering drawings, accurate maps, land cadastres, population lists indicating origin disappear. Everything that could tell the truth about who lived here before the wars and what technologies were possessed. Fortifications in the shape of multi-pointed stars were located all over the world, from Europe to America, from Asia to Africa. They were destroyed first, even before the main combat actions. Moreover, not due to military significance. From the perspective of classical fortification, the star shape is meaningless and even detrimental to defense. They were destroyed because they were critically important nodes of the communication or energy transmission system. After the destruction of all the nodes, the system ceased to function as a whole. What was happening to the population of the warring territories during this time? Cities in preserved photographs from the mid-19th century look frighteningly, unnaturally deserted. Huge, wide avenues, clearly designed for heavy traffic, stand almost completely empty. Rare, lonely carriages hopelessly get lost on these wide highways, emphasizing the scale of emptiness. And just 20 years after the end of hostilities, the official population of these same cities suddenly doubles or even triples dramatically. How is this even possible from a biological point of view? A woman is physiologically capable of giving birth to one child approximately once a year at most. To realistically double the total population in 20 years after the catastrophic loss of a third of all men of reproductive age, every single woman would have to give birth to at least 5 or 6 children, and all of them would have to survive to adulthood. In conditions of total unsanitary practices, widespread epidemics, and extreme childhood mortality of the 19th century, this seems like complete biological fantasy, an absolutely impossible scenario. Yes, there were trains with orphans across America. Yes, huge orphanages were opened. But the main question is different. Where did the adults go? Look at the census. In 1860, New York recorded 80,000 men aged between 30 and 45. In 1870, there were 22,000. Where did the remaining 58,000 go? The war in America took lives, but such a gap is not explained by the mathematics of war. A whole generation simply disappeared from the statistics. Either the population was mass imported from unknown regions, or technologies were used that science is afraid to talk about. Remember the incubators for infants at world exhibitions in the late 19th century? Entire pavilions with glass boxes in which live infants lay, a kind of medical wonder for the public. Hundreds, thousands of children without parents, artificially raised in airtight boxes. At the Paris exhibition of 1896, Dr. Martin Cooney demonstrated 6 incubators with infants. By 1904, there were already 53 incubators at the St. Louis exhibition. The growth was exponential. Visitors paid money to see the children in boxes, as if they were exhibits. The official version was the salvation of premature babies. But where did so many premature infants come together at one place simultaneously? Where were their mothers? Why didn't any hospital of that time use this technology if it worked? It was a demonstration of mass production of human beings. Alongside the replacement of the population, a linguistic purge was taking place. From 1850 to 1870, so-called literary languages were created around the world. Old dialects were banned. The unified language of the Old World was fragmented into dozens of artificial dialects. Italy, before the official unification, is hundreds of diverse local dialects that people actually spoke in everyday life. After unification, it is a single, standardized, literary Italian language that in real life no one has ever spoken. Modern Hebrew was entirely created in the 1880s, almost from scratch, as a completely artificial linguistic construct. The Russian language undergoes a large-scale reform by Dahl, which strictly unifies pronunciation rules and writing norms across the vast territory. Divide and conquer, the ancient principle of controlling the masses. Different, incomprehensible languages to each other automatically mean different, alien peoples, and different, divided peoples who do not understand each other will never remember or realize that not long ago they were parts of a single, undivided world. Replacing the living is not enough. The dead remained. From 1860 to 1880, cemeteries are being redone throughout Europe, Russia, America. Brigades tear down old symbols from tombstones. They replace them with standard crosses. They move graveyards. Up to 70% of graves are lost. Look at the dates. Old cemeteries lack graves from the period of 1850 to 1870, a 20-year gap. Where are the burials of the victims of epidemics? Where are the mass graves of those who died in wars? They are not there. Mass graves have been concealed, declared ancient mounds, or leveled to the ground. The dead cannot lie. Therefore, their traces were erased with the same meticulousness as the traces of living witnesses. And then the new masters of the world organized a grand parade of military trophies. World exhibitions of the late 19th and early 20th centuries showcased to the astonished public technologies that, according to the official version of science, would be invented only in 50 to 70 years. Systems of wireless transmission of electrical energy over distances, moving mechanical walkways for the transportation of people, video communication devices that allow one to see a counterpart thousands of kilometers away. All of this was solemnly demonstrated, evoked admiration from the public, was detailed in newspapers, and then, poof, it vanished without a trace. And half a century later, 70 years later, the same technologies would be officially reinvented, but strictly for profit, under rigid corporate control, with patents and monopolies on production. At the same exhibitions, the so-called human zoos were shown to the general public, enclosures with savages, supposedly brought from distant colonies for demonstration. But take a close look at the faces of these so-called savages in the preserved old photographs. Pronounced Europoid facial features, these are definitely not representatives of some primitive tribes from the jungle. These are captured, seized representatives of the defeated old world, humiliatingly displayed before the crowd of victors as living trophies. To permanently secure their victory for many generations to come, it was only necessary to carefully reprogram the consciousness of the growing generation. And from 1860 to 1880, literally all over the world, the strict Prussian system of mass education was simultaneously introduced, as if by a single command. On all continents, in all countries, children are taught a strictly edited history of the victors from an early age. They are instilled with the idea that the bloody wars of the 19th century were local conflicts without any common connection. They learn that their ancestors lived in dirt and ignorance. They are told that progress goes linearly upward, from savagery to civilization. The concept of luminous ether is removed from physics textbooks. After the destruction of the power stations of the old world, it was necessary to erase the very concept from science, so that people could not even imagine an alternative to oil and coal. Technical inventions of the late 19th century appear too abruptly, without background. Radio, electricity, telephone, all at once, immediately in perfect form, without the evolution of prototype. Did Tesla gain access to secret government archives? Did Edison adapt blueprints from plundered libraries? These are not revolutionary inventions of geniuses. These are permitted remnants of knowledge, stolen during wars. The old world possessed technologies of true freedom. Free energy meant that no one controlled access to heat and light. A global transportation network provided movement without borders. Open libraries offered free access to knowledge. The new masters of the planet do not need this. They need dependent slaves. An operation was carried out in 5 stages. The first, synchronous wars destroyed the carriers of technologies. The second, fires burned the documentation. The third, replacement of the population through shelters and migrations. The fourth, schools programmed the forgetting of the past. The fifth, dependence on oil, coal, and gas made people dependent on those who control the resources. It is quite possible that even the very chronology, the calendar itself, was radically altered and shifted. The old world, with its advanced technologies and free people, did not perish mythically thousands of years ago in the deep past. It literally perished yesterday in historical terms, in the mid-19th century, within the memory of our great-great-grandparents. And the conquering victors instilled in us through the education system that we are the absolute pinnacle of evolution, that our unfortunate ancestors lived in cold caves and primitively hit each other with clubs for a piece of raw meat. But the real facts stubbornly tell a completely different story. Beneath our feet lie their majestic cities buried in the ground. Above our heads, their monumental buildings still rise, which we cannot replicate. In museums, their amazing artifacts are carefully preserved, the technology for making which we have lost. The asymmetrical wars of the 19th century are a critical point of fracture, a turning point in history. It was after these wars that humanity did not rise, but sharply and catastrophically degraded. We have deliberately been deprived of access to free sources of energy. The once united world has been artificially divided into dozens of warring nations that speak different languages. The true history of our origins has been irretrievably stolen. The unique technologies of our ancestors have been forever taken away. Do you see the old windows half sticking out from under the modern asphalt and paving stones? This is not natural accumulation of time and dust of centuries at all. These are direct, undeniable traces of mass bombings that buried entire lower floors of buildings under debris and soil. Do you see the massive doors, 5, 6, 7 meters high in the old buildings? This is not imperial architectural pathos or an attempt to impress. These are the very ordinary entrances to the homes of those people who were significantly larger than us, not only in physical height, but also in the grand scale of thinking and breadth of knowledge. Every month you pay for electricity, heating, water supply. Before the wars of the 19th century, this was not required. The planet provided energy for free. Wars took away that peace. They called it progress. Truth breaks through the asphalt. Melted forts cry out about technologies that should not have existed. Burned libraries whisper of stolen knowledge. Empty cemeteries with a 20-year gap remain silent about people erased from memory. It is time to stop believing in the textbooks of the victors. It is time to remember the truth. Subscribe to the channel. Do not forget to click on the bell so you do not miss new investigations. Ahead are many more mysteries and discoveries. We will continue to search for evidence, ask uncomfortable questions, explore what official science ignores. Because the truth is always nearby. You just have to want to see it.